Hey everyone, Dogbert here, back in DC Worlds Collide. I'm doing the top 10 tanks today. I am planning on doing a top 10 support and top 10 DPS. This will be based off of what the characters are actually tagged as, and some characters might be tagged as one thing but can work as another, as you'll see in the support one mostly. So with all this said, we're going to take a look at these characters in the game and see what makes them so good. So here we have number 10 on the list. He is actually a purple character, or elite character, Captain Cold. So this would be helpful for newer players, that he is a pretty good tank. Reason why, when we look at his ultimate ability, he does give shield to the front row allies that allows them to absorb some damage, so he can be placed on a shield team if you need him as well. That extra shield is always nice. Plus, when somebody hits him, if you rank him up, he does have a chance of adding Frostbite, which is just extra damage, and eventually it's very easy to rank him up to increase that shield proportion to 45%. We definitely want that. His basic's not much to talk about. It just does damage and has Frostbite. And the advanced ability, giving him the ally with the lowest proportion of hit points, the decrease in superpower damage take by 20%, so going against like a Dr. Fate or Superman, something like that. And also gives him stacks. He also gets stacks of sturdy armor, recovery, increases that. He's an okay tank, that's why he is at number 10 here, because of that. But he is easily accessible. You get him very quickly, right in the beginning of the game or the tutorial. Moving on to number 9. And at number 9 is Bizarro. He is an epic character. He is just not that great of a tank. That's why he is down here at number 9. We really don't have many tanks in the game. So what Bizarro does is interesting with his ultimate. He actually freezes a character or stun, but it's considered a freeze. And that keeps them from doing anything. They don't do basics, they don't do ultimates, nothing. It is a random character, so you don't get to pick it, unfortunately, and he does heal himself, which will eventually go to 30% if you rank him all the way up. That requires ranking up Bizarro, though, and it goes to a 2-turn freeze, which could be devastating. His basic is nothing to talk about, it's just damage. He does have a second ability. His advanced ability does put a stack of Weaken for 2 turns onto enemies. And if they have, and in very situational, if the enemy has 3 or more stacks of Frostbite, he also adds a stack of Weaken for 2 turns once you rank him up. The other thing that's nice about him is his passive giving increases max hit point by 10%, and he gives the ally with the highest max hit points a flower, usually the other tank. When this ally takes damage, Bizarro will help share that damage to 25% and then decrease it by 30%. And then eventually when you rank them up, they actually get a small heal, which can go up to 5% once you get them to rank 8. That's why Bizarro is down here at number 9. Moving on to number 8. Number 8 is another elite character often used on a self-sacrifice team if you have nobody else for tanks. That is Frankenstein. He's an interesting character in that he sacrifices his current hit points and attacks an enemy 2 times, dealing physical damage equal to 135% of his attack, and he grants additional attack to his ultimate equal to 15% of his own lost health points, so he can hit pretty hard. I know there's some hard-hitting stages with him on it. He's quite nasty to go against, especially as a healer. And after casting, if he goes below 50%, he grants himself Shelter, which is like a defense up. His basic's not much to talk about. Just does damage more or less. And his skills gain an additional equal to 8% of his lost hit points. Again, it's just powering up to make him a high damaging tank. He is a good secondary tank. His passive, he gains 3% damage reduction each time his current hit point decreases by 10%, so every time he essentially uses his ultimate, or he just takes a lot of damage, he'll get stronger. When an enemy defeated, though, he does heal himself for 10% of his max hit points and permanently gains a stack of Firm Stand. Firm Stand increases his block rate by 10% up to 15 stacks, so if you got 10 stacks, you'd have 100% block rate, reducing his damage. Heal amount increases to 15% and damage reduction to 4% when you rank him up more. He's an okay tank if you need him to slot in. If you don't have any of the tanks higher on this list, or you're just starting out the game, he will work pretty well for you. Moving on to number 7. Number 7 is a character I do not have unlocked, and that is Martian Manhunter, the legendary character. Unfortunately, he is very far down this list. He is just not that good. He does rely on a healing team. Let's look at his skills. It is nice that he does give damage reduction to all allies. Unfortunately, you have to use the ultimate for that, and that means using energy. When he does this, he receives healing equal to hit points equal to 20% of the heal amount will be restored to other allies. He does heal the rest of the team. Eventually, he dispels debuffs and increases that damage reduction to 40%. Unfortunately, it is an ultimate, though. His basic attacks an enemy target, dealing physical damage equal to 40% of attack power and healing self for hit points equal to 80% of his own attack power. Eventually, it goes up to 100%, so he heals himself up, which feeds into his passives, as you'll see. He has an advanced, or whatever they want to call it, deals power damage equal to 100% of attack power to the 2 enemy targets with the highest attack power. And so that's nice that he is adding weaken or an offense down to him. It doesn't do a whole lot of damage, though, being a tank, so these numbers aren't that great. He also dispels a type of buff off of them, and eventually he adds weaken for 2 stacks. When we get into his passive, he increases hit points by 10% each time total healing received reaches the equal to 40% of max hit points or restore. Attacks an entire enemy row. So depending on where you're at, that could be the front row, could be the back row in the fight. It just happens naturally. It's an okay kit. We just don't have a spectacular healing team yet. We have an okay healing team right now, and that's the problem with Martian Manhunter. He also gets damage reduction when other allies receive healing. Hit points equal to 20% of the healed amount will be restored to self. If he is inflicted with burn, the skill loses its effect, so he doesn't want to face a burn team. Unfortunately, that's what put Martian Manhunter down here so low on the list. He is also a legendary on top of that. Unfortunate that a fan favorite character is so low, but we might get somebody in the future with the way they're releasing characters that will move him up the list. Moving on to number 6. In at number 6 is a character who is seeing one hell of a resurgence right now, mostly thanks to Star Sapphire coming to the game, making the heal team viable. The guy who's kind of edging out Martian Manhunter even on the heal team for the tank, and that is Bane. He has seen a tremendous resurgence now that he's become much more useful. He was always very useful in the early game, but then he would drop off in the later game. But now, because of the heal team existing, he has come back into the later game. And the reason why is people love his ultimate, because it does have a chance to stun targets. So that 30% chance does increase, though, as he gets his passive going. What it does, it heals himself for equal to 180% of his attack, and then deals physical damage to everybody. And of course, like I said, that chance to stun. Ranking them up, you get the stack of weakened at all enemies as well, so you're knocking down their offense too, with a chance to stun plus healing yourself. And it really comes down to his passive. Whenever healing is received, he permanently increases healing received by 2% and attack by 2%, and using his ultimate very quickly in the beginning, which does use 3 energy, unfortunately. He does a big heal to himself that really starts getting Carol Sapphire going and allows her to start going. That's why he is so good. And then if you add in somebody like a Zatanna or Kid Flash, so that every time Zatanna, or every time he's doing damage, he's constantly healing himself. It really helps out. Plus, whenever he gets hit, as we see in his other passive here, if he takes too much damage, he starts healing himself and injecting it. You can reduce this by ranking him up and getting his emblem going. He does need his emblem to be up this high. Without it, it's not as good, but he's still pretty good. He's almost probably up there. He also gets a chance of stacking sturdy armor. His basics, nothing to write home about. It is just damage. So Bane right now, he is at number 6. Could move up later as we get more of the healing characters that really help him out. The one problem with the healing teams, it doesn't do a whole lot of damage. But they do have a lot of sustain. That keeps him up. That was always his problem, is you couldn't really sustain him. But now we can. Moving on to number 5. So now we've gotten into the top 5. Now we're getting into some really amazing tanks where you might want to switch them out as needed for whatever you're doing. As a secondary tank, usually tend to be on the lower side for the lower top 5. Even could be in a higher side. This one is Grodd, who is absolutely spectacular on a debuff team if you're using him. But he can also fill in as a secondary tank when you just need somebody to do some knocking back of the action bar because of his ultimate, knocking back 25% of the action bar. Plus he's adding slow. Plus he's adding weekend. Absolutely spectacular kit on this guy, and he's very tanky. And if the target has, once you rank him up, if they have four types of debuffs on them, and control effects, the knockback on the action bar increases by another 15%. This is why you want him on a debuff team. Plus, he throws out debuffs himself, so he works incredibly well like that. But like I said, you can also slot him in on other teams. He's a bit more plug-and-play friendly than he looks because of those debuffs just being so powerful. Even his basic adds defense break for 2 turns. If you don't know what defense break is, it decreases defense by 20% and crit resistance by 5%. It is big. So it's nice to see him do it on a basic, making him incredibly valuable. His passive at the start of battle gains 40% damage reduction for 2 rounds. In other words, if you have something you're going into where there's a whole lot of burst right in the beginning, he is a great tank to bring in because he could probably survive it with that 40% damage reduction right off the bat. And when he takes damage from damage deals with debuffs, each type of debuff grants himself 5% damage reduction. Again, you can see why he is in that slot for debuff teams, because if they're going to be putting out debuffs anyway, somebody like a Raven, Sinestro, Killer Frost, Batman, all these people put out debuffs. At the start of the battle, then, if you rank him up, it goes to 55%, meaning he'll probably stay even longer, and eventually, once you get to rank 8, the damage reduction increases to 8% instead of 5. He just doesn't die after the time because it's very hard to kill him if you don't know how to take on a debuff team or clear those debuffs off yourself. His other passive, he has a 30% chance of increasing 1 random type of debuff on the damage dealer by 1 stack for 3 rounds, and eventually goes up to 50%. Extending debuffs, absolutely phenomenal character, definitely worth investing in. He's a bit easier to get because he is an epic character. So I think a lot of people who already have him definitely invest in Grodd. Moving on to number 4. Now, number 4 is the only character on here who absolutely needs a very high investment to get up to number 4. If he does not have his emblem fully maxed out, he drops down to more like Martian Manhunter levels. Still in the top 10, but then everybody else would move up, like Grodd would move into 4, etc. And that is Penguin. He's never been a very good tank before he got his emblem. All the power is within his emblem. The reason why, the first thing he does when he gets his emblem, he increases the attack power back row allies by 10%. That is absolutely phenomenal, because that's where your DPS are. You want them to do more damage. When his umbrella is raised, he increases the status damage of back rows by 80%. Again, more damage. And then finally, the one you really need is his 3rd level, where he keeps his umbrella raised to protect himself and extends to the end of battle so it never goes down. What it's talking about is this 2nd ability, the advanced ability, raises his umbrella to protect himself, increasing defense by 100%. And while it's up on top of this, he's granting 30% damage reduction to the back row for 1 turn, but he's going to keep it up all the time, so this is going to be gigantic, another 100%. And eventually, once you rank him up, you get up all the way up to 150% in damage reduction for back row for 40%, plus he's buffing them, giving them more damage. But like I said, he needs this emblem. The other nice thing about him, if we look at his ultimate, he does heal himself based off of what he does hitting the back row with those birds. He does heal himself up a little bit. It's only a 2-cost ultimate, so it's not terrible. How often you use it, though, depends. He does do best on a poison team, though, because each stack of poison will increase that healing. And his passive, during battle, he increases his own max hit points by 20%, and he gains a healing received bonus of 30%. That eventually goes all the way up to 24 for hit points and 40% for his healing received, making him a great choice for a tank, usually a secondary tank. But like I said, he absolutely positively needs that high investment in his emblem. If you're a newer player, you're probably not going to have it. This is a little bit later game type of tank. And moving on now to number 3. Number 3 might be a surprise to you. It might not if you've been playing the game for a little bit longer, but it is Superman. The legendary tank, the first legendary tank we had. He is an amazing character if you can get him. That's one of the big problems with him, is because he is legendary. He's also a red character, which we don't have too many good red characters in this game, but he is one of them. Of course, he works best on a burn team, giving his abilities. Mostly because of this ultimate he does have. He deals a lot of damage for a tank. He could be technically a DPS too, as well as a tank. But he does add 2 stacks of burns. If the detonation occurs on the current attack, he gains 20% physical damage reduction, eventually going to 30% and even more damage. His basic, he deals damage. This deals damage, but eventually he does give himself a stack of haste for 2 turns, which is like a speed up. He does have a secondary skill where he attacks the enemy with the highest attack with a freezing vest. He does 160% attack damage, and then he knocks back their action bar on top of it. This goes up to 30% at level 2, or rank 2. He also gains 30% damage reduction, takes an additional 15% additional superpower damage, and eventually goes up to 40% damage reduction, making him very tanky. And the big thing about him, during battle, it increases his attack by 10%, and when he takes a fatal attack, his hit points drops to a minimum of 1 and grants invulnerable for 1. He just kind of stands there, you can't kill him, and that allows somebody else on his team to heal him back up. But he only does this once per battle, though, so don't worry. He can also heal him. Once invulnerable ends, he heals himself for 10% max hit points. I mean, you have to just wait him out until he takes a turn, and then you can probably try to kill him then. And pray to God somebody doesn't heal him up. He is an absolutely phenomenal tank if you are lucky to pull him. He's definitely worth the investment. At one point he was number 1 in the game, but a little bit of a rework has helped the number 1 in the game surpass him now. And there's another character that's available, a little bit more available than him also, that surpasses him, as you'll see in number 2. So number 2 I have to talk about is Nightwing. He is an epic character, so he's a bit easier to obtain than, say, Superman at number 3. Nightwing is good before his emblem. He is absolutely crazy with his emblem. This is just a spectacular tank that just survives and survives, and on top of this, he also has a chance for a stun. But Nightwing is also mostly all about his block. You can see I have his block up to 45% just in gear. When you look at his skills, why is block so important? Well, on top of this, he gets 20% block off of his passive, and when he blocks for the first time, he gets shelter for 2 turns. This decreases damage taken from the next attack by 50%. So the next 50, he's going to take 50% damage, plus I have increased the block up to 30%. On top of his gear gives me a 75%, and then if you get past his block, he still takes less damage. And when he takes damage, he has a 10% chance to initially to shock the damage dealer with electricity to 70% of attack. If the damage is blocked, the chance increases to 60%. And then eventually, once you rank him up, it increases to 90% damage and a 100% chance when blocking. It actually makes it so he puts up pretty good DPS on a team. I mean, he's not going to be the number 1 DPS, but for a tank, the amount of damage he puts out is pretty good. His basic, he just does damage. Nothing to talk about. And his ultimate is also great. He attacks the highest attack, whoever the highest attack is on the enemy team. 53% of his attack, and he has a 60% chance of inflicting stun for 2 turns. That is huge. You can take out whoever that high DPS is for 2 turns. On top of this, he gives Firm Stand to his front row for 2 turns. Firm Stand increases block by 10%. So in my case, I would end me up to about 85% block. You can see how this is becoming ridiculous. How he is a tank. Let's see it. For each type of buff he has on top of this, he increases his chance of stun by 10%. So he's going to give himself a Firm Stand. If you can get some buffs on him before that, he's going to increase this, so he has even better chances of stunning somebody. And eventually, once you rank him up, increases Firm Stand stacks gained by front row to 2, so he's helping out the other tank as well. And if he has at least 4 types of buffs, the stun duration increases to 3 rounds. You're just locking down that big damage dealer. This can come in very handy for control, especially when you're trying to. You need to just if that damage dealer's sitting in that back row and there's like a big tank in front of you, and he's just killing you in that back row. All of a sudden you stun him, and now you can focus on that tank, getting him down. This is an absolutely spectacular character. I use him constantly. Like I said, he's very easy to get. His shards are available, so you can rank him up fairly easily. Definitely want to work on him. And he gets even more insane, like I said, once we start looking at his emblem. His emblem's insane too. The first level, nothing to talk about, just extra 15% damage to his basic. But then his second, he gains a buff, randomly second from Recover, Sturdy Armor, or Firm Stand for 2 rounds every 3 times triggered. And then eventually, once you get him up to the 3rd level, if you got him all the way up there, triggers when damage is dealt, grants an additional 2% attack equal to 2% of his own. Gets attack power equal to 2% of his own max hit points, so he does more damage. That's not where all his benefits really come from, though. If you look, once you get him up to tier 3 of level 25. He gets another 32.4% block. Essentially, my Nightwing blocks 100% of the time. Plus, he's getting damage reduction on top of this. He gets extra defense as you go through. You really, that's really where you want to get him, is up to there to get that block up. I believe that's block rate, not block itself. Sorry. As you're going around, I mean, there's damage reduction as you go. You can see how much the block goes up. He just gets better and better with this emblem, not so much because of the emblem skills, but because of the emblem stats. I think he might be the only character like that, as far as I can think of off my head. He is definitely an awesome tank, but there is one more tank. I don't think it's going to surprise you who it is, who's better than Nightwing even. Finally, we come to number 1. He didn't always used to be number 1. He took a little bit more of a reworking. He is the most attainable legendary in the game, Lex Luthor. And he is definitely legendary. He is the number 1 tank in this game. And it is all because of his skills, really. His ultimate is the big thing. He activates a defensive force field that grants all allies a shield that can absorb damage equal to 16% of max hit points for 2 rounds. Also dispels 1 type of debuff. That's huge. Dispelling the debuffs is gigantic. Eventually you can get it up to 18% and you get 2 debuffs cleared. This is great for getting rid of annoying poisons or burns, anything that could be killing your characters, and he's going to do it to the whole team. Eventually the damage absorption goes to 20%. His basics, nothing to write home about. It's just damage, and he gives himself cloak, so he blocks the next incoming debuff or control status effect like a stun or something to himself. His advance, he rallies allies together in which he calls the highest attack on your team to use a basic attack on the enemy. He also has a 25% chance of inviting another ally to assist. The chance increases to 30%, and he grants to whoever he called strong attack like an offense up. You're giving strong attack to your highest damage dealer usually. You can see why this is getting absolutely insane, what he can do. On top of this, he has his passive when using basic attacks. If he doesn't have a shield, he'll give himself a shield that can absorb damage equal to 9% of his max hit points for 2 turns, so it's an extra shield on top of his normal shield that he gives out to everybody else. And of course, he has to invite the ally with the highest attack system in his in battle as well. His secondary passive, whenever his allies use a basic attack a total 4 times, he charges his armor, he gains damage reduction. Essentially, this will be after the first round, because your characters are probably going to use all their basic attacks. You have to take roughly 5 turns. It's probably going to be his allies. You're probably going to start charging this up every round. Essentially, roughly 10% damage reduction for the first 4 rounds. Get up to 40%, so he doesn't take as much damage. It eventually goes up to 12%, so you get there a little bit quicker. And then it eventually knocks down the number of basic attacks to 3 to trigger it, so you get it even quicker. On top of all this, is Tactical Renaissance you probably want to activate, not to mind the whole fact that allies get extra attack, hit points, and defense. The big thing is, when they have a shield, you get another 12% damage reduction to everybody, that includes himself. That, and then eventually, each time a shield is gained, they'll eventually get 2% damage amplification, which happens often. So run, don't walk. To get Lex Luthor as soon as you can get him through the character fusion by just using shards. Now it's actually gotten much easier to get him now, because you don't need to actually have the characters to rank them up, you just need the shards. He's an absolutely spectacular tank, and well deserving of being number 1. On top of this, he has an emblem, which is just going to increase his heals. His damage reduction just increases everything. Increases the shield damage absorption by another 3%. Increases the shield damage absorption changes to 6%. While the shield is active, he also gets an increased defense of 20%, crit resist by 20%. He just gets better and better. And then eventually, regardless of whether he has a shield, he will gain a shield and invite an ally to his battle. Well worth investing in his emblem as well. Invest everything you can in the Lex Luthor. You want him, that's for sure. He is number 1. Let me know if there's anybody you think I missed or I didn't put in the right order. I hope I covered everything. Until next time, everybody.